Lewis, good to be here with you, man.
My man, thanks for being here in my studio. Appreciate it.
You. Yeah, I've had many thoughts of sitting in this chair and being here. So, you're kind of one of those guys that went first. In 2013, you started your podcast. Nobody was podcasting back then. I thought I was early. I've been doing it for 6 years. But dude, you just had this vision and foresight. I mean, it was a long time ago, 10 years ago.
10 years, man. It's been fun. Yeah, I had a vision. I was actually stuck in LA traffic. I just moved to LA from New York City for a girl, and then she broke up with me the day I moved. The day I landed,
you got here.
It was an up and down relationship. So she was like sabotaging it. That we got back together the next day, and it was like up and down, right? But I remember it was frustrating for these first 6 months I was here, and it was just like, man, feel like I'm dealing with stress, and I feel like I'm kind of stuck in these different areas of my life, my relationship, my business, and I was stuck in LA traffic, literally. And I remember people were just like honking and flipping each other off and swearing. It was just like a busy traffic day, which is probably like every day in LA. But I mean, I remember thinking there's got to be a way for me to consume something to help me get out of this stuckness feeling. And also maybe I could do it and help others also who are stuck in traffic. And that was where in that car ride, I called 2 friends of mine who had podcasts. And I asked them about it. I go, what is this thing? I don't even know what a podcast is still. But maybe there's a way I could be in people's cars and help them and also help myself. And that's where the ideas came from, being stuck in a car and stuck in life. But on the outside, it looked like I was succeeding. I had a business,
Which is worse, because people think you have money, they think that you're doing great, and you're like, you're trying to figure out how to get that up.
Exactly. And that's when a few months later, I was like, all right, I'm going to try this podcast thing, and I'm going to try it once a week for a year as an experiment to see if I like it or not. And it ended up being something I just fell in love with, and now 10 years later.
Yeah, well, it's obviously you're very good at it. And what's cool about a podcast too is you just get the opportunity to meet so many amazing people and get that time with them. I tell everybody, start when, if nothing else, you have an excuse to meet really amazing people and learn from them. It's fun with you. One of the cool things about it is I followed your path, and you've studied a lot of the same things I have. Like my own journey, I feel like, I started this path of self-development 10, 15 years ago. And I've tried to accumulate all the information from the podcast, the seminars, the conferences, the coaching, the books I read, and I've put it into, my men's coaching group. But one of the questions that I get a lot that I've had a hard time being able to lock down is people say, okay, if I don't know what I want to do, how do I find my purpose? How do I find my passion? And that's why I just read your new book, and The Greatest Mindset. And what was cool is I'm 70 pages in, and I said, I literally go, finally, somebody's put it in writing how to find your purpose. Because I figured it out, but it was like so many intricate things, and it's so difficult to explain to somebody. It's like I needed a place to send them. I feel like your book, I finally have somewhere I can send people.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's figuring out the 3 Ps. First the passion, the power, and the problem you want to solve. And I think a lot of people will chase money. And so they chase that, and then they realize, okay, I made it after like 5, 7, 10 years. I figured out how to make money by working really hard, grinding it out. But then you're like, all right, this is not fulfilling to me. So let me go start something else that brings more meaning to my life, but now I have money. You see this a lot with like driven male entrepreneurs.
That's what I did.
Right, exactly. Let me figure out the best way to make a lot of money so I can protect myself, my family, and be good financially. But then we need more meaning. And this is not right or wrong, good or bad. It's just, okay, if you're in a season where you're like, I want to do something where it's, how can I integrate everything at the same time? It's figuring out what you're passionate about. And, maybe you were really excited about real estate, when you first started out. And maybe you still are in a certain way, but it's just you've evolved and you transition and you're reinventing yourself. But it's figuring out, okay, what am I so excited about? And it could be something that doesn't need to be related to business, but like, what are the things that really excite me? I believe that if we're not excited about the thing we're spending time on, when the economy hits, when we go through a breakup, when whatever happens, we go through a health scare, something is stressful and there's a lot of pressure on us, it's going to get too much that we're going to be quit, we're not going to give our full effort, or it's just, we're not going to have the energy to sustain us through those seasons. But when we're excited about it, we have more energy to carry us through. So it's finding the likes, the interests, the things that excite us around our passions. The second P is our power. And these can be our talents, our invisible assets. I didn't know that being in the bottom of my class, being in the special needs classes, being afraid to speak publicly, all these insecurities were actually invisible assets that were actually became a superpower for me. And I always thought I asked really dumb questions. And I was like afraid to raise my hand in class because people would laugh at me when I'd ask these dumb questions. And everyone already knew the answers. But in life, I continue to ask these dumb questions. And I'm like, this may seem really simple, but what did you tell me about this? And for whatever reason, everyone will message me and say, I'm so glad you asked that. You know, I'm so glad that you asked that to that person because that's what I was thinking. And I think a lot of people act like they have the answers. And I never act like I do. I'm just like, here's what I'm learning and here's what I'm figuring out and here's what's working for me. And so by asking these kind of questions that I was always afraid to ask, these invisible assets that I always wanted to ask, that curiosity has become a power of mine. So it's learning to lean into the invisible assets and make those your superpowers.
Well, you've done that in so many areas because, you know, and it's one of those things that I learned about 5 or 6 years ago that changed everything was the power of vulnerability.
Yes.
And we'll get into that later in the podcast. I do want to touch on all that, but it's that same thing. It's like, we think if people didn't know what's going on inside or going on in our heads, the things that we don't want people to know, like, oh, they'll think I'm stupid if I ask this question. But in reality, it just makes people gravitate to you because all of a sudden you're safe. All of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't need to have my shit together all the time.
Yes.
I'm around this guy. I'm allowed to ask dumb questions. I'm allowed to be vulnerable and authentic when I'm in this room. And all of a sudden they just gravitate to you. They want to be around you.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the third P is, I think when it's finding a problem that you want to solve. So when you can figure out what you're passionate about with your likes and interests and excitement, and figure out where your true gifts and talents lie. And these could be invisible assets that you think are not talents right now, but eventually become. I never thought I was going to be an interviewer. You know, I didn't know that was like my gift, but it became a gift of mine over time because I've always been curious. So I used my passion, I used this invisible asset, and then I overcame my insecurities and made those superpowers by learning how to speak publicly, by training every week for a year at Toastmasters. And then I said, okay, what's the problem I want to solve? Well, most of my childhood, I felt very insecure. I had a lot of self-doubt. And I used false ego, false confidence to mask that insecurity and doubt. So I was able to accomplish things, but still internally I felt like a scared little boy. And I just had this thesis, like, I believe that self-doubt is the killer of dreams. It's what holds us back emotionally in relationships and business, career, sports, all these things. It makes us fearful. So if we can heal the root of self-doubt and overcome it, then we can have more courage to act towards our dreams. It doesn't mean we're going to accomplish them, but we have more courage to take action. And I've seen so many people with a lot of talent not act courageously and hold themselves back, their gifts. It's because of that insecurity of self-doubt. Because you could have a ton of talent, you could have all the credentials, all the skills, but if you still doubt yourself, it doesn't matter if the world believes you're capable. If we don't believe we're capable, we're going to hesitate. We're going to be held back. We're going to let fear, be the leader of our life as opposed to courage be the leader. And so it's learning how to get to the root of this self-doubt, this insecurity. And so I said to myself 10 years ago, okay, how can I go on this journey to rid the world of self-doubt? This is the killer of dreams. It doesn't mean you're going to accomplish everything when you let go of self-doubt, but learning how to manage it, navigate it, and be empowered with your insecurities by overcoming them and taking action, that will support you.
So I think that's one of the things that I've discovered as I've gotten to be around all these amazing people like yourself, is self-doubt. It doesn't go away forever for anybody. But I love that you said you learn to manage it. I think that's the part that a lot of people, they question themselves, well, if I have this self-doubt, it must be true. But I guess, and you said you spent 10 years now working to help with this problem. Mm-hmm. What are a couple of the main things people can do to push through that self-doubt when it creeps up?
I think first off, usually we doubt ourselves for a couple of reasons, but one, there's a fear of failure, a fear of success, or a fear of judgment that holds us back from taking action. So I want to write a book, but I'm afraid of what? One of these three key things. Well, where does one of these three things, what's the root of these things? So when we can get to that, it's the idea that I am not enough. So where do I feel like I'm not enough? From what story? And how do I go back and mend that story, create new meaning behind that memory that's causing me to feel and think this way? That's causing me to stay stuck or blocked in taking action. Again, it doesn't mean you're going to be great when you launch something that you have no skills at. You're going to have to learn how to overcome the challenge. I didn't know how to speak publicly. So I went every week to Toastmasters, to a public speaking class for a year. After that year of training, failing, making mistakes, having a coach, reviewing my speeches, improving, I was a lot better. I still wasn't incredible, but after a year of training, I had more skill, I had more competence and confidence, right? Now, I still needed to heal the memories of being picked on, bullied, made fun of, and not enough in class from school, because those are the things that made me feel this fear of judgment. What if I get up on stage and people are on their phone? What if I get up on stage and they're yawning? What if they're laughing? What if they're talking? What if they say that was a horrible job? That wound of judgment stems from I'm not enough. So when I can heal and mend that and say, okay, maybe I wasn't good enough there, but it doesn't mean I as a human being am not enough. So I just wasn't skilled. And so I need to keep getting better and improving. And by improving on a weekly basis, I'm gaining competence. And that's giving me more confidence. And when we create a list of our biggest fears, public speaking was one for me, and we actually face the fear and we go all in on that fear, we gain an exponential amount of confidence when we've overcome something that used to be so terrifying for us. It's like another level of superpowers.
Yeah.
The thing that held you back the most, when you conquer that, you feel unstoppable. And so it's turning the insecurity into now a superpower. But you have to be willing to go through the pain, the hardship, the failure, this sucks, the embarrassment period that most people don't want to do.
Well, that's one of the things I learned from you. I read The Mask of Masculinity several years ago. And so when I started my coaching program, the first thing I have the guys do, they get together for this first weekend, 50 guys actually, which is a coincidence because when you first came out and talked about your sex abuse, and you said it was a group of 50 guys, which is just, I didn't even know that until your recent article in Success Magazine. But I have them all get in a circle. And one of the first things that we do after I have them go through and do their badass list of why they're amazing and kind of talk about it and then share it with each other because we're so used to not doing that. Then I get all 50 guys in a circle and I read a series of about 40 questions. And if it applies to you, you step in the circle. And because what happens, we feel like we're alone. We feel like we're the only ones that have been through these things, right? So I say, if you were ever cut from your baseball team, for example, cut from a sports team, step in the circle. If you ever had a parent divorce when you were younger, step in the circle. Then I get a little deeper, I say, hey, if you were ever sexually abused as a kid, step in the circle. And like first time we got the group here, it was about 8 guys. And, everybody's bawling. All of a sudden your siege of the masks are falling off, right? Like these masks that we wear. And everybody's like, wow, A, I'm not alone. B,
that's great.
I can actually feel safe. And then we know which wound to go after with the guys. And so then after that first weekend, my program's designed around making them do things that make them very uncomfortable, starting with that stepping in that circle. For some, that's the hardest thing they've ever done. Then I have them jump off a rope swings 250 feet. Then I have them swim with tiger sharks. Then I have them, we just got back from Dan Fleischman's ranch holding 20-foot anaconda pythons, and I have them skydive, and we've done all this stuff in less than a year. We've just one thing after another. But a lot of the hardest things we have them do is get in front of the guys and share their feelings. Get up and...
It's one of the biggest, scariest things to do is be vulnerable in front of another person.
Yeah.
People would much rather skydive than talk about their insecurities and vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Much rather hold a snake for, this massive snake strangling them than to release their emotions in front of another human, because that's extremely vulnerable. And the fear of judgment is a real thing for a lot of people. That was my biggest fear. Mm. But when we can overcome that, again, we feel more empowered in our actions and in our vision.
Well, I was going to ask you, how did you receive love differently once you started speaking about your sexual abuse? Because I think for a lot of people, they have this feeling of, oh my gosh, if people really knew who I was, they wouldn't love me or I wouldn't be lovable. But then you actually share it, and the experience, I'm guessing, was much different.
Yeah, I mean, when people were able to look me in the eyes and say, you're my hero, when I opened up about that experience, it didn't make sense. It was like the Matrix broke or something for me. It was like, this is a simulation and what's going on. And it allowed my nervous system to relax and start to trust that I can love myself and share all my insecurities or shame in the right setting and context.
Correct.
And that even if someone else doesn't receive it, I can receive it myself. Because we can't determine how someone's going to react or respond to us sharing information. That's why I think you need to be really careful about when you do it, how you do it, with who, and set the context before you share these things.
Yeah.
But when I did that, it just started to open up a healing journey for me. So it started to unlock my heart. And it took many years of like healing, and it's still an ongoing journey. That allowed me to receive love and accept myself, because for so long I never accepted me. So I chased things to fulfill a hole inside of me, as opposed to creating wholeness on the journey, and therefore able to receive things because I'm whole, not needing to chase to feel whole.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I had a similar experience when I was 14. My dad wanted me to get held back in high school or junior high to be a star baseball player. I wasn't. I was like the 9-hitter, second base. Like I knew what I was. And anyway, and when I told him I didn't want it, he put a lot of pressure on me. He looked me in the eyes and said, just so you know, you're not good enough. You'll never play again. And I wrote under my hat, you can appreciate how bad this is now, because I didn't know the power of affirmations and words back then, but I wrote under my hat, you're not good enough, to inspire me to play better for 3 years. Yeah. And so,
how did it do?
It's good. I had a good high school career. Ended up being, of course it did, right? But I was coming out of lack or fear always. And so it wasn't until I was about 37 years old, I hadn't thought of this hat in 20 years, and I saw my hat and I realized, oh my gosh, what have I done? And this voice basically came to me and said, hey, this has served you. It no longer does. Let it go.
Wow.
And so I, released that. And yeah, dude, it was powerful. It was funny because I'd been the #1 realtor for a decade in my city and county and everything else. And all of a sudden I didn't have this like burning desire to go be #1. I didn't have to prove myself, and it was screwing me up a lot in dating because I always was trying to prove that I was worthy of love. And God bless me, I just wanted to feel loved.
Yeah, of course.
But I was doing it in all the wrong ways. So I'm posting pictures of me on the boat with the girls and going out on 50 dates a year, a different girl every week or whatever, every day, whatever. And just trying to just mask essentially this need of feeling loved and enough. And so it wasn't until I had that experience as an adult, I went, oh my gosh, A, this is horrible. What have I done? But B, like, I'm innocent. I just wanted to, and it kind of helped explain myself to myself, honestly. And immediately I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder I'm always trying to prove myself. I don't have to. Like, I'm enough, and I'm going to do so much more, but I'm already there. And so it's just kind of one of those experiences in life where you want everybody to be able to understand that like, hey, you can't earn more or less of love, of like, you're just enough. You just are.
Yes. That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. So it was funny, as I read The Mask of Masculinity, I saw so much of myself in so many of these, you talk about the 10 different masks, and maybe just speak to that a little. I think that book, if you guys haven't read it, if you're listening to this podcast, I mean, it's so beautifully written, because masculinity used to be seen as like, we're going to be smoking our stogies and whiskey, and we're going to be tough. We're going to have the girls behind us, and the whole thing. And it's just not that. It's just not. And I feel like you kind of led this charge. I'm trying to do the same thing with my group, this new form of what it looks like to be a man.
Yes.
And I think that's, it seems like that's a lot of what your personal mission is.
Yeah, I think the Mask of Masculinity was me identifying the mask that worked in a certain area, like this worked for you.
Right.
Right? These masks worked for you to work really hard, to prove yourself, to strive for more, but it didn't work for you emotionally at the end of the day. So it worked from a place of fear or lack or not enoughness to drive you. But once you accomplish certain things, you still feel like, well, why don't I feel enough? Why don't I feel lovable? Why don't I accept myself? It's because we haven't healed the wounds, so we haven't let go of the mask that got us there. And I think some of these masks might be helpful in certain moments, but we shouldn't keep them on all the time.
Right.
But I had the stoic mask, the know-it-all mask, the athlete mask, where I was just like, it was hard for me to be wrong. When I said something, I didn't want to be wrong because it was a fear of judgment. So I had to figure out to like win and be right at everything in life. And if I wasn't winning or if I wasn't right, then I was wrong. And I wasn't enough. And I was unlovable. And I'm, never going to amount to anything. So I had to learn to let go of that and have humility.
That person gets exhausting to be around.
Exhausted.
Yeah.
And I was very reactive. I was a loving guy until I was poked, and I was like, you're wrong.
Dude, I was the exact same way.
And then you're like, no, I'm right. Let me prove to you. You know what I mean? And so that was a big wake-up call for me to be like, okay, what are these masks that men wear in general to protect them? It's all to have armor to protect ourselves. It's not coming from a bad place.
Right.
But it's coming from a place of protecting ourselves emotionally, physically, and a self-soothing mechanism, because we haven't been willing to face the parts of us that are lacking or that we're shameful or that we're insecure about. And we just haven't had the tools. And I think now, guys like me and you are trying to talk about it more openly, to share these tools with people and give people a space to share, heal, and grow.
Yeah, exactly right. I had a guy come to me last week, actually, and he's been doing the work, and he had some sex abuse when he was a kid as well. And so he's really been working through a lot of this stuff. And he said to me, he said, Jimmy, I don't know how to integrate this correctly. I don't know how to do the work. What does that mean? And so I gave my explanation, but I would like to hear from you, somebody who's done, because you've done so much work.
Yeah.
What does that mean to do the work when somebody says I'm doing the work?
I think any type of healing modality. And so I've done a lot of different healing modalities. This can be, I meet with a men's group once a month. Okay, cool. You're sharing. This could be I journal daily and I share my feelings to myself on paper. This can be I'm doing some type of meditation practice or prayer work. I'm integrating what I'm thinking. I'm being conscious. I'm thinking about my feelings and my thoughts, and I'm processing them. This could be I have a coach. It could be I have a mentor. It could be I have an emotional coach, a spiritual coach, a therapist. Anyone that allows you to be conscious of your thoughts and your emotions, to express them in whatever ways that work for you. And it might be a range of ways. This could be I'm doing sauna sessions or ice bath sessions, or I'm doing extreme workouts and processing my emotions and thoughts. Not masking by just working hard, but allowing myself to process. And then integrating these lessons is key. So processing is one, sharing is one step, but then integrating and saying, okay, what's the lesson? What's the takeaway? And what is the tool that I'm going to use in the next time my nervous system feels heightened or reactive?
Well, I like one of the things you've done in your new book, The Greatness Mindset, again, is at the end of each chapter, you give one thing for people to integrate. It's simple, but it's like, hey, it's just one little thing right there where you can see, and it allows you to start integrating immediately into what you've learned.
Exactly. And I think there's an assessment on page 201 of the book that is really just asking yourself, am I living in a greatness mindset or more of a powerless mindset? So this is page 201, where when you go there, you'll see there are 6 things that make us feel powerless. And I'll just say it quickly. First one is lacking a meaningful mission. When we're not clear on the path we're heading, it doesn't mean we have to have it all figured out or know exactly like this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. But for this season, this 6 months, 2 years, do I have a direction I'm heading towards that is meaningful to me? And I don't have to do some grand big thing. I just got to be focused on going somewhere. When we lack that and we have no direction, we feel powerless. Now, you could be in a transition and just say, I'm in a transition, I'm discovering, I'm figuring things out. Cool. You know where you're going. You're trying lots of
You're still in purpose.
You're in purpose. But when you are clueless of what your mission is supposed to be right now, you feel powerless. You're susceptible to being like clinged on to the worst of the society, right?
Well, and you talk about this a lot, is if you don't have your life figured out by design, then it's just going to be by default.
Of course, yeah. And you're going to get into trouble more.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what I mean? And you're going to feel less than. So that's a powerless mindset, is lacking a meaningful mission. The second one is controlled by fear. We're all going to experience fear in different areas and different ways of life. And every new season, there's going to be some type of fear that comes to us. I'm not a father yet, and I'm sure when I have kids, there's going to be some level of like uncertainty. And it's not bad or wrong, but when we're controlled by it and we don't act courageously because of it, we are powerless. So don't be controlled by it. Know it's going to be there and learn to manage it. The third thing is crippled by self-doubt. Again, I believe self-doubt is the killer of all of our dreams. And when we are crippled by it and we don't act courageously because we're so insecure of who we are powerless. Fourth thing is we conceal past pains. I think you'll understand this, that when you do your men's work in your groups, when men start to open up, they connect. They feel more relaxed.
Yeah.
They trust. Maybe it takes a few minutes to like break them open and they're nervous at first, but eventually there's this coming together. There's this safety, community. There's this vulnerability that is beautiful and more loving. But when we conceal our past pains to everyone and don't have at least one trusted person we can open up to, it makes us feel sick. It makes us feel like a weight. It makes us feel powerless. We might feel powerful that no one knows this about us, but really it's holding us back because it means we're so scared of the opinions of others that if someone knew this about me, they would not like me. We're giving them our power. So we're making us feel powerless. The fifth one goes into that, defined by the opinions of others. Yeah. Now we need, obviously, community to thrive and feel happy and meaningful in life. But when we don't act courageously because of the opinions of others, they have the power over us. Or we're so worried that we're not doing it in spite or because, because we want to do it. We're not doing it because we're afraid of what people will say, defined by the opinions of others. And the sixth one is drifting towards complacency. So again, if we have a mission that we're clear on, but we're drifting and we're not acting on it, we're powerless. So the 6 things that make you feel more powerful and the greatest mindset is being driven by a meaningful mission, knowing there's fear in your life and turning that into confidence. And that's going to happen in every season. You're going to have to face fear and turn it into confidence.
Well, I love how you talked about that. Every time you step into that fear, every time you do something that scares you, every time you get a little bit, out of that place of comfort, you only have to go past the line a little bit, but it's so much easier to do it the next time. Exactly. And what you're doing is you're conditioning that, I like that word, confidence around your fears.
Exactly. Yeah. The third one is, again, overcoming self-doubt. I'm a big fan of, again, making this fear list. Here, write a list of your biggest fears and go all in on them one by one. By doing that, you will become more self-confident. You'll overcome your doubt. The fourth one, again, is healing past pain. As a man growing up, I never thought about healing emotions, healing thoughts. I was just like, okay, I need to heal my broken bones and scrapes and bruises, but it was never about the emotions. But there's an amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score. And that's not about, physical wounds, although it does that too. It's about the emotional and psychological wounds. And if we are just masking them with more money, more fame, more success, more girls, but not going inward and healing, it'll never feel enough. The fifth one is, again, creating a healthy identity. And I think this is the work that we need to do with self. What is the identity that I've had my entire life? And we can do a self-assessment. Okay, the identity you have is the things you say about yourself to you, internally and externally. And your actions and your integrity with self and others. That is your identity with self. You can say you want to do certain things, but if you haven't been doing them consistently, that's not your identity.
Yeah.
If other people can think you're great, but if you say, no, I'm not worthy, I'm horrible, I wasn't good enough. If you keep saying these things, that's the identity you're creating for self. So we must learn to have compassion from this moment, from everything we've said about ourselves from our past. Because I said a lot of mean things to me about me. And not beat ourselves up more, but now have awareness and compassion. And say, okay, moving forward, what's the identity I want to have with self? I want to be loving. I want to be patient. I want to be kind. I want to be giving. I want to be wise, not stupid. I want to be all these other things. So I need to start speaking to myself and to others about me differently, and then acting in accordance and congruence with my words. That is a healthy identity. That is a greatest mindset, not a powerless mindset. Not, I suck, writing in my cap, I'm never enough, or I'm not good enough. And I get it. I did all these things.
Yeah.
But that will not support us at new levels of activity in our life.
Yeah, I always say to people, anytime somebody says something that's a disempowering words, I say, hey, the power of our words matter. Like,
yes.
There's so much power in our words. And so every time they do that, I stop them and I just correct them. I said, if they say, oh, I'm going to try to do this, I'm like, you're going to what? Like, oh, I'm going to get this done, right? Like, it's those little shifts on how we think about ourselves or how we talk to ourselves. If, when I played sports, I would always be like, God, Jimmy, you idiot, and you can't yell those things.
What a dummy.
Right.
Dummy.
Freaking idiot, and it's like, wait, who is that? Where is that? What is that voice? It's, and so it seems like a small thing, but how we talk to ourselves, you'd never let somebody talk to your friends like that.
Exactly. And if they, recorded all of our thoughts and our words to ourselves, and we broadcasted this to the world in a loudspeaker, they would put us in a mental hospital for all the mean things we say about us. If they would put us in a hospital to be like, do you need some medication? Is something wrong with you? And most of the world does this. And if they recorded your thinking and your words and they broadcast it, people would be so worried about you.
So somebody that's stuck there, they're stuck in that negative mindset, they're stuck talking to themselves negatively. I think that's very common. I think most people are doing that. besides affirmations and incantations, what else do people do to break that?
I don't think the affirmations will work necessarily if you don't have the tools of how to heal first. So we can mask with affirmations, but if we haven't gone to the root and healed the wound and learned the tools on how to integrate these lessons into our daily life now, and saying these things are going to be lies. We're saying something, I'm lovable. I don't feel lovable.
Yeah.
So we need to go to the root and heal first. That takes, for me, an assessment of self, and that's why I created the assessments in the book. But I think it also takes some type of support. I think it's really hard to do this on our own. How are we supposed to figure it out when we don't have the tools? So we need to go to find someone else who does have the tools and have them support us. This can be a friend that really is figuring out their life. It's going to be a parent, but a lot of us bring on these emotional wounds because of generational trauma. So they usually drop it down to us. It's not their fault. They didn't have the tools either. So we need to be the ones to break the generational trauma by seeking out the wisdom. Thankfully, there's a ton of books, tons of podcasts, and free resources from trained experts on emotional healing that we can lean on. Half this book is about healing.
Yeah.
And me finding the best therapists and neuroscientists to say, what are these tools that we can all use?
Well, and then finding places where you feel safe to process emotions. It's the whole reason I started my
coaching programs, one-on-one therapy, whatever it might be, start somewhere. Where you can start to open up and share and be vulnerable. And from that, have integrating healing tools to practice daily. The affirmations are great once we have the tools and we start processing. Then these are reminders that I am these things, because we start to heal and believe it and own it. But if we don't own it, it's not going to be it. It's going to be a false lie.
Yeah. No, I like that extra. I mean, it's true because we know deep down if you're saying something that's, a total liar.
Yeah, if you don't
believe it. Yeah. And so, no, I think gives a really good blueprint for people that, because I think so many people, there's a lot of people drifting through life. I think you talked about that, where they just don't have that aim. They don't have that purpose. But then there's people that are legit trying to figure it out. And I think you've nailed it on the head with that, is if they go back and they heal that thing, then they can quit self-sabotaging the path forward.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. Well, so in relationships, you and I have a lot in common that way. We've both remained single a long time, in relationships, but not married, no kids yet.
Yeah.
Where in my world, I grew up in Utah in a Mormon culture where most average age is 23 years old, where people get married. And there's just a lot of...
How old are you now?
41.
So you're like an outcast.
Right? Oh, dude, like I'm 10 years past outcast, right? Like now it's just like, this guy's...
This is crazy eyes on top.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot of expectations and things like that. And one of the things I want to talk to you about had nothing to do with the book necessarily, but I think a lot of people... a lot of pain in life. I know for me in my 20s and in my teens, most of my pain came from this expectation of who I was supposed to be or how my life was supposed to work or how it was supposed to look. And when you can remove those expectations and, so the Tony Robbins 101, replace it with appreciation, it really changes everything. So I was going to ask you, I guess, as you kind of took your own path as well, I don't know how much shame and guilt you had. I know for me, it really drove a lot of my life in dating for a long time, and I almost made bad decisions, but I'm so grateful looking back because I needed to be me first to, draw in the type of women that would have a guy like me now as opposed to a guy like I was.
Sure. So what's the question there?
So I guess the biggest thing I have is like, how did you deal with the expectations of not being maybe what other people thought you should?
I left home at 13. To a private boarding school. I begged my parents to send me away because home life there was beautiful moments, but it was also, you didn't know when it was going to be unsettling moments. So there was love, but then there was kind of fear and chaos. So it was up and down, up and down. So I didn't feel emotionally safe. And again, my parents were doing the best they could, but it was a little chaotic. And so I left home at 13. And I felt like I wasn't given this expectation. The one thing my parents did a lot of good. And one of them was like to go after what you want and become the best self and go after your dreams, and we support you in that. They never told me like you need to get married and you need to commit to this person and anything like that. So they weren't like pressuring me in terms of relationship. I think because they both had a broken relationship and got divorced eventually, and they weren't pressing to get married quickly. They were like, take your time, get to know someone. And I never felt it from society personally, because I don't know, maybe as a guy, I didn't feel like that type of pressure. But I did, after many failed relationships, ask myself, and I don't look at it as failed, many that didn't end up committing longer term.
Yeah.
I realized I was the common denominator of all these relationships. So there was something in me that was attracting certain people, that was staying in relationships for a certain period of time, and then relationships falling apart eventually. And I was at the root of all those relationships. So I had to take a look in the mirror and ask myself, well, why am I attracting these types of women? Not that they're bad or wrong, but it was never the right fit for me. Why am I committing? Why am I doing these things? And then why ultimately are they not working out? And that's where I got to look at a lot of the healing that I needed to do from the model that I saw of relationship with my parents. And I had to do a lot of work. I mean, I went deep for about 2 years of emotional coaching every week, hours on Saturdays, just like processing and healing and getting tools and going back and calming my nervous system and learning how to not be a people pleaser and all these different things that I would do in relationships. And it's been a beautiful journey. You know, I wish I would have learned it 10, 20 years ago, but it happened when it happened.
Well, I think part of the gift that you have, I feel this way at least, is because it was so difficult for me to figure out in my own life, I searched so hard to do it. And that's what allows me to now help coach and train other people, because I had to go acquire all the tools for myself.
Exactly.
And so I feel like I went on this 15-year journey to bring it all in.
Yeah, and our greatest pain oftentimes can be the things that helps us with other people's problems.
Yeah.
You know, if we allow ourselves to learn, we allow ourselves to gain wisdom and knowledge from that pain, then we can be of service to help others overcome that problem.
Yeah. I'm curious, you talked about chaos, and I've kind of had a similar home. I always say 95% of the time my dad was like the best. That 5% was really shitty.
Scary.
Yeah. And you said something that made me realize, it wasn't until about a year or two ago, my brother actually mentioned this. He said, we never felt safe as kids because you never knew when dad was going to lose it, right? And so there was
the same way, man.
And so what did you do? I mean, just from a personal level, what did you do to go back and heal that and kind of overcome that? Because I feel like I probably have some work still to do there. Yeah. I know your dad ended up getting injured and there were some things there, but I'd love to heal that father wound in my own life, because I don't think I felt safe as a kid. As much as I felt like I had a happy childhood, like I was just an adventurous, curious kid. I had fun, I had friends, I had a family full of love, but there was chaos. And that chaos kept me from feeling that safety that I think a kid needs.
I mean, I can always say what worked for me, but having an emotional coach support me in the process of healing has been powerful. Certain exercises that I did allowed me to go back to that 5, 7, 9, 13-year-old self that felt very unsettled. And with me as the adult, have a conversation with me as a child and create an environment and almost a spiritual scenario where I am facing my 5-year-old self, my 7-year-old self, my 9, 11, 15-year-old self, and having conversations with me/him as an adult. Might sound weird, but I think—
No, I've done some of that work, some of that.
And it's a lot of the healing the inner child wound is it, because you may never get the apology you needed from your parents. My dad passed away and he had an accident, so I couldn't really have a conversation with him in my 20s and 30s. And so you may not get the apology that you want from the person that hurt you. You know, I never got an apology from the man that sexually abused me. I never saw him afterwards. I don't even know if he's alive, but I faced him spiritually and I forgave him and I forgave myself and everything else. And so for me, I had to go back to the 5-year-old that felt very fearful and afraid and have multiple conversations with him until I felt like I've integrated that emotional, psychological wound into my current self and it feels calm. And I'm less reactive and triggered when scenarios and situations in life might have reacted to me previously because of that wound. So it's a process of doing that. It's a process of, again, for me, having a coach to support me. I just think trying to do the hardest work on your own is doable maybe, but I just don't think it's as wise as it can be.
No, I agree. I mean,
have support, a group, an individual, someone support you on the hardest thing that you have never overcome. Yeah. How do we think we're going to figure it out on our own? Yeah. We don't have the tools. If we had the tools, we'd have figured it out by now. Yeah. So get support.
Well, I'm guessing of the people you've had on your podcast, you've had some of the greatest athletes, influencers, minds, everything, business, and you name it. I would guess the majority of them, if not all of them, from Kobe Bryant to whoever, Mel Robbins and everyone in between, they all have coaches. They all have people that they're going to.
And when they get to the top, they don't say, all right, thanks for getting me here. I'm done. I don't need you. Right. They say, how can I hire more coaches?
Right.
Support me.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful, man. Well, thank you for sharing that. Our stories have a lot of similarities that way. And every time I'm reading your stuff, I just laugh. I'm like, even you talked about getting cut from a sports team, right? So when I was 14 years old, this was probably the most impactful day of my life. I was sitting we had this field, and it was kind of a grandstand, and all the families it was the last day. So it's the day they give the trophies for first place, second place. They call the All-Stars. And I made the All-Star team every year of my life. And so I'm sitting with my 15 best friends. We're sitting together. We're 14 years old, that age where you're just so impressionable, right? Yeah. And they start calling up the All-Star team one by one. And they call, and I'm sitting there with my buddies. These are all my best friends. And I look down the line at one point, there's 5 trophies left, and there's 6 of us. And I can tell these 5 are making the team. And it hits me, and I'm just my chest just feels like it's suffocating. It was the only time in my life I felt this way. And sure, one by one, they call them up until I'm sitting by myself with all my friends on the field getting their trophy and their hat for the All-Star team.
You're the only one
left, sitting there by myself.
That paid.
Dude, and I'm literally just started crying. I didn't know what to do. I was 14, right? But it was a moment. I'm so grateful for this moment because I had enough self-awareness. I don't even know where this came from. But in that moment, I said, Jimmy, you didn't work hard enough. That's why you're not out there.
There you go.
And so it was this moment where I kind of became an achiever. And there's some good and bad to that moment, but I used that pain because I told myself, I said, you will never feel this way again. This is exactly what I said to myself. I said, you will never feel this way again because you didn't work hard enough. And that was the last time anyone ever had to tell me to work hard enough.
I know, same feeling.
You can draw on that.
I was in, I don't know, it was 4th grade. It was recess, and I don't know, there's probably 30 kids in our class, probably 15 boys and girls, each. And the teacher says, all right, we're going to play dodgeball game, right? So we're going to go out to recess together as a class. We're going to play dodgeball. And I'm going to pick 2 captains. You guys pick one by one. And they picked 2 boys, right? 2 of the more athletic boys. And they started picking one by one all the guys. And then I was the last guy, and they skipped me.
Oh, no.
And they started picking one by one all the girls until I wasn't even picked. I was just the last one to go on whatever team was left. Yeah. And I remember feeling so humiliated and embarrassed. I was just like, never again will I get picked last. And that drove me for so many years. And, that energy of okay, I'm going to work hard because I don't want this to happen is a good thing, I think. But it's if we believe I'm not enough, so I need to go do this to feel lovable, that's where it hurts us. And Kobe talked about this where he didn't score 1 point in a whole summer basketball league when he was 12.
Wow.
He didn't score 13 or 12, something like that. He didn't score 1 point in a whole summer tournament, every day, every week games, he didn't score once. And his parents said, we love you no matter what, whether you score, the highest score or you score 0, we're still gonna love you. And he said that gave him the courage to then go be a dominant beast. He was like, all right, they're gonna love me, now I can overwork, I can do whatever I want, but not to prove that I'm good enough, but because I have that love inside of me, I can go be an animal, And I think there's a difference there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I used to not be able to tell that story without getting emotional. Now I can laugh because I've healed the wound, but and I can see the good and the bad of that moment. But anyway, just as I was reading your book again, that was another story that I'm like, God, that's these experiences that drive us. But there's so much in this book. I'm so glad you wrote it. Like I said, I used to send people, Tony Robbins has a YouTube video, it's called The Best Day or something like that. It's about 7 hours. And until this book, it was where I would send people to figure out their purpose and their passion. But you've nailed it. I mean, the book absolutely covers it. So happy that it's out there for people that I think everyone knows where to find you. But if they want to get the book, if they want to figure out more, where's the best place to send them?
School of Greatness podcast, at Lewis Howes, anywhere on social media. And The Greatness Mindset. Feel free to pick up a copy or get one from you.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I've given away about 200 so far.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Lewis.